Now that you've heard about the classical view, let's look at a very different approach to macroeconomics, known as the Keynesian view. Questions about the applicability of the classical view arose during the start of the Great Depression. In the 1929 to 1933 period, referred to as the beginning of the Great Depression, there was high unemployment and surpluses in product markets. Based on the classical view, one would assume that these surpluses and the unemployment would go away as wages and prices adjusted to equilibrium. But wages and prices did not adjust to equilibrium, and high unemployment persisted. In fact, unemployment was really high, and by January 1933, unemployment in the US reached 25%. It was very hard to attribute such a high unemployment rate to only frictional unemployment. It was very evident to many economists that there was really a very large level of involuntary or cyclical unemployment. John Maynard Keynes, writing in the United Kingdom in the 1930s, felt that price and wage rigidities could perhaps explain why there was such high and persistent unemployment. He believed that there were many reasons as to why prices and wages would not adjust rapidly, and this would lead to very high and persistent and prolonged periods of unemployment. Essentially, the Keynesian view argues that there are impediments to wages and prices falling to equilibrium levels. This phenomenon can be referred to as sticky wages and prices, downwardly rigid wages and prices, or downwardly inflexible wages and prices. While excess supply could eventually bring prices and wages back to equilibrium, this could take a very long time indeed, and the economy would suffer quite a bit through this prolonged period. We can take a look at this again through the same graph we used for the classical view by taking a look at the labor market. So let's take a look again at the labor market. In the labor market, once again, we have nominal wage on the vertical axis and labor on the horizontal axis. And we have a downward sloping demand for labor and an upward sloping supply of labor. In this graph, we can see that we have W star as the equilibrium, and we have W prime as the current wage. Let's assume W prime is the current wage. According to the Keynesian view, due to downward rigidity or inflexibility, it is quite possible that we will end up with the wage being stuck at W prime and not coming down towards W star even after a prolonged period of excess supply, which means involuntary unemployment remains in the economy for a very long time. So wages do not adjust downwards, and we end up having a lot more people willing to work. LS prime is very high, and firms willing to hire very few workers. LD prime is very low, and the gap between these two is this persistent involuntary unemployment. Within labor markets, this wage inflexibility can result from legal minimum wages, which are above the equilibrium wage, or they can result from contracts, from labor unions negotiating contracts above the equilibrium wage, or they can even result from firms wanting to pay a wage that's higher than the equilibrium wage. This is often known as an efficiency wage. And firms might want to pay an efficiency wage in order to motivate their workers to work more efficiently or to hire good quality workers. Similarly, in product markets, it's possible for prices to stay high because large firms might be reluctant to lower prices even if there is surplus. Due to these reasons, prices and wages could remain high and over the equilibrium for a long period of time, leading to prolonged unemployment and surpluses. If the economy has a tendency to settle in a situation with significant unemployment, an appropriate government policy would be to stimulate demand. If the government stimulates demand, there would be an increase in employment and an increase in purchases in the goods and services market as well. And both these actions can lead towards higher employment and a higher GDP as well. Governments can prompt an increase in demand through many different ways, three of which are as follows. The governments can directly purchase goods and services, that is by increasing their spending, or the governments can potentially lower taxes that would encourage private spending, or the government could lower interest rates that would increase investment by firms, or other purchases that are interest rate sensitive by consumers. These stabilization policies are often known as fiscal and monetary policies. And the Keynesian view suggests that we should adopt these policies, especially when we have persistent and high involuntary unemployment. Therefore, in the Keynesian view of the world, unlike the classical view, the government can play an active interventionist role in order to help bring the economy back towards an equilibrium. In the classical view, this happened by itself. Competitive markets would lead to market clearing wages and prices that would therefore negate the need for the government to intervene. In the Keynesian model, the government can intervene and get us back to an equilibrium very quickly. The classical view and the Keynesian view examined here are polar extremes. In reality, you can say that some markets are competitive while others have sluggish wages and prices. So there remains a debate among economists as to which set of assumptions is appropriate in which markets and at which times, and this leads to considerable vigorous debate among economists, especially since policies that would be recommended depend critically on what view you adopt. The debates tend to be very high profile and very extended. Now that we have studied both the classical and Keynesian view, we will delve into these in much more detail subsequently.